I'm John Batchelor, and I am here to present comments from Europe and from America about a global concern we learned from the Gallup poll. The global concern is the economy. No matter where you are, no matter what your income level, according to the Gallup survey just put out on email, there is overwhelming concern for the economy, and and pieces of that have to do with shelter, with food, with the low wages, but it doesn't matter what your income is, says Gallup. You're overwhelmingly concerned about the cost of living, about the economy worldwide, no matter your income, well-to-do or not. Thaddeus and Judy, I welcome you this morning because we're going to turn our attention first not to the Gallup poll, but to remarks by the President of France in these last hours, front page of the Financial Times. And 24 hours ago, a lengthy piece in the Financial Times about similar concerns, talking to German citizens who are alarmed at the fracture between the United States and NATO and between the United States and Germany. I begin with the Macron remarks because he looks to be speaking for a number of the voices in the EU. President Macron says EU-US tensions over Greenland and tech are far from over. I'm going to begin our recording now so that we all know together that we're recording for the show later on. Here we go. And I'll come right to you, Judy. And then Thaddeus, we'll go back and forth. Here we go. 5. Am I recording? Let's see if I'm recording. Yep, I'm recording. This is the making of the John Batchelor Show. This is what it looks like when you're making carrot soup. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Batchelor. I welcome my good colleagues, Thaddeus McCotter, American Greatness. He is in the great city of Detroit. And Judy Dempsey, the senior scholar for the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. She's in the great city of Berlin. I occupy many miles north of the great city of New York on the Connecticut-New York border. We're looking at, however, the global economy. We're also looking at the reaction to political events in these last days. The global economy is easily summarized from a Gallup poll that we have in these last hours. There is concern around the world, no matter your income, no matter your region, with the economy, with the cost of living. And inside that, the cost of food, the cost of shelter, the low wages, and the inability to get ahead, no matter whether you're extremely wealthy or not anywhere close to subsistence level. The concern is the economy. At the same time, there are geopolitics that crowd in to confuse everything about who is in charge and who is not. That is the gist of the remark by the President of France in these last hours, featured on the front page of the Financial Times. That's the significant financial newspaper published in London for Europe in English. The headline reads, EU-US tensions over Greenland and tech are far from over, says President Emmanuel Macron, the subhead. French president calls on the bloc, that's the EU, to take the necessary steps to become a true global economic power. Judy, a very good day to you. Thanks for joining. Observing Mr. Macron from Berlin is a profoundly helpful way of characterizing his remarks as we observe him from the East Coast of America. Mr. Macron looks to be saying something commonsensical. Is it welcomed in the EU? Good day to you.
Good day, John, and Thaddeus, and thank you for having me on your show. It's normal now that we have problems with the United States over Greenland, problems over tech, problems over AI. But I think the subset of Macron's interview, which he gave to other major newspapers in Europe, is that Europe is not going to actually become the global influencer if it doesn't integrate, if it doesn't have strategic autonomy, if it doesn't actually push forward its defense and security structures as quickly as possible. And above all, Europe has to be competitive. And this issue of competitiveness is holding Europe back. The member states are divided how to do it, how to reduce regulation, how to do banking union. And Macron was pressing all the right buttons ahead of a major meeting of EU leaders in the coming days, but I'm not sure there will be a consensus on this.
And Mr. Macron's voice has often been at odds with the EU. So your sum right now is that this is not at odds with the EU. There are other voices in the 27 nations saying similar things. Is that correct, Judy?
They're saying different things. I mean, people do agree, leaders do agree with President Macron's diagnosis. The question is how you're going to get there. And now he wants a kind of EU first for goods and so on. And several member states are against this. He wants a different kind of integration. Some countries are against this. And the depressing aspect is that Europe is in a deep economic trough. And it is in a deep crisis about the lack of competitiveness. And Macron says this, and they agree with him, but they don't implement it, despite the calls by, former prominent bankers and the former head of the central bank in Frankfurt, Mario Draghi. They say this has to be done, and somehow there's foot dragging and there are divisions, and there isn't that necessary push from leadership in Brussels or in the member states.
That is, you have a question for Judith.
Judy, well, the purpose of the European Common Market, the EU in general, has been to foster agreement on these very types of issues. Are they saying that there's a problem with the structure of the EU itself?
You're speaking to somebody who believes the structure now is fundamentally flawed. I mean, after the Second World War, what was then the European coal and steel community, supported by the Americans, was designed to overcome divisions, especially between France and Germany, have a peace organization, have one based on prosperity. Those days are over. And we have seen the whole disaggregation of the multilateral order. And the Europeans aren't actually dealing with this now. I think your point is right that Europe is out of sync. It's living in a kind of past of what it was set up to do, but it won't embrace the future, what it has to do. And this is about security, defense, grabbing globalization and realizing that depending on the United States and dealing with this huge Russia threat are two huge existential issues that the Europeans aren't working together to deal with.
President Macron, with the skill of an op-ed writer, identifies areas of conflict that are sure to come back. He says the Greenland crisis is momentarily quiet, but it will be back, and it has made it easier to see that there are conflicts here that cannot be resolved immediately. One is the matter of hate speech. Europe has a completely different understanding of what is tolerable online and what is not. Same for data privacy, and especially for what children can see and cannot. And then there's the matter of digital taxation. So overall, Mr. Macron is saying that this isn't just about territory of Greenland or even the fact that we want security from you without keeping up our portion of it, the debate that we've had in the past. This is about something that represents the strength in the American economy these last years, which is the digital universe, the AI growing. Is that something shared in Germany, that the opinion of digital genius in your home varies widely from the US pressing for completely open internet and Europe looking to regulate it?
There is a huge difference, and the gap is actually widening between the United States, especially its tech companies, and the European member states. They know AI is here to stay and it's going to develop at an extraordinary technological pace, and they have to try to keep up with it. On the one hand. On the other hand, they see the enormous downsides of it, what it's doing to children, the intrusion, the pornography, the exploitation, and they're trying to get tabs on this, get a handle on this, and rein in the tech companies, particularly the American ones, and this brings in the whole gambit of data protection as well. And this is a real source of conflict. But the Europeans, there is a consensus, more or less, among most of the member states on how to control this. There are some countries, particularly Poland, which is curious. They're trying to dilute some of the pressure on these tech companies, maybe for investment reasons. But the Europeans are very, very worried about how this is actually doing enormous unqualified damage to a younger generation.
Thaddeus, you have a comment or question for Judy? Thaddeus? I'm just checking here. Thaddeus, do you have a comment or question for Judy? Oh, I think his mic's on mute. I'll get it. Thaddeus is, for some reason, not on stage. All right,
There
here
we
we
are.
go. Thaddeus, you have a question or comment for Judy?
Yes, I was put out of the studio, John, so I just managed to get back. So I missed the last bit of the conversation. I don't want Judy to think it was anything she said. It was
the digital universe, Thaddeus.
Well, I missed the part of the conversation. I don't have a.
All right, let me characterize.
Particularly trenchant question to ask.
I'll go ahead again, John, if you want.
No, I can pick it up. It was the question of the conflict between Europe's vision of data privacy, hate speech online, the digital universe, and especially what is it?
The question would be that, Judy. The question would
just a minute. Let me fire you off. That is okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go ahead.
Well, Judy, as you know, the United States has a First Amendment guaranteeing the freedom of speech, and we always have to reconcile that with data privacy, hate speech, and online comment. Is the EU running into this type of situation? And if they are internally, then that's also going to have a ramification for how they deal with the United States on this issue, isn't it? And we're seeing that now.
Indeed, John, and Tadeusz, and you're right about the First Amendment, which it depends on which constitution you're dealing with among the European Union member states. But there's no doubt that there's a growing consensus on the danger of hate speech, what it does to politics, what it does to polarization, what it does to populist parties, what it does to disenchantment, what it does to the whole idea of a political culture and dialogue and listening. And this is becoming a very corrosive influence. And on the European Union level in Brussels and in the member states, they want some way of containing this. But this means actually dealing with the tech companies in the United States. It's a big bone of contention.
We're speaking with Judy Dempsey of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. She is based in Berlin as a senior scholar, and Thaddeus McCotter of American Greatness, former member of the U.S. Congress. He's from the city of Detroit. We're addressing tensions that President Macron underlines in a front-page piece in the Financial Times, having to do with larger issues than just Greenland. But Greenland he sees as the opening conversation to all these tensions between the EU and its ambitions to become a world power that has security concerns as well as economic concerns, and the United States. Now we'll turn to, in specific, the tensions with the Trump administration when we come back. That is also evident in articles in the Financial Times. I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor with my colleagues, Judy Dempsey of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and Thaddeus McCotter of American Greatness. Been addressing the tensions between the EU generally on issues such as Greenland or the digital universe, but now specifically to Germany, heretofore the engine and banker of all of the EU, and certainly a very strong voice when it comes to the immediate future. Judy, the general way to present this is the Financial Times, in interviews with many German citizens, finds disappointment and disheartening prospects for the German citizenry watching the break or apparent fracture with the United States, specifically to do with the Trump administration. And the role that Germany has played in the recovery of Europe and the role that the U.S. has played in providing security not only for all of Europe, but especially for rebuilding Germany, makes these general remarks not angry, but despairing, disappointing, in distress that it's gone so badly. And again, it comes to the American president and his lieutenants interfering in German elections. Is that something you hear routinely in German? Because I'm reading it only in English.
Both the German political class and public opinion are extremely worried about the MAGA influence among far right-wing and populist parties in Europe. And as you know, President Trump and his supporters are trying to set up pro-MAGA think tanks across the European Union to actually try to influence the outcome of elections. There are elections taking place in Hungary. There are state elections, regional important elections taking place in Germany this year. And of course, President Macron is in his last 14 or 18 months in France. We'll see what will happen there. But there's a great, it's more than despair. It's a kind of helplessness. How are the Europeans actually going to do with this great country called the United States, which always supported values and democracy and liberalism and other issues that were the backbone of what made today's European Union? And so there's a great deal of frustration and very few actual solutions on how to deal with this, because this is going to demand real, strong, unambiguous leadership that is not short-term in outlook, but long-term strategic outlook on how Europe is going to deal with the changing geopolitical contours around the globe, actually, but led by the United States and Russia.
Are the politicians of the AfD taking advantage of this fracture?
Well, the AfD is it's the second largest party in the German parliament, and they're running high in the opinion polls in two of the East German states, which will take place later this year. But actually, there's an awful lot of divisions inside the AfD, and indeed, the AfD is very critical and was very critical of the White House attempts to actually gain control of Greenland, buy it, or whatever it wanted to do. And so that really dented the kind of support for the AfD, and they had to distance themselves from this, and they were quite critical of what the American administration was trying to do with Greenland. But the AfD is pretty it's brittle in terms of there's corruption there, the pro-Russian one faction, there's lots of nepotism in the party, but at the moment they're still running high. But now it's up to Chancellor Merz's coalition of Christian Democrats and Social Democrats to try and claw back their support and beat off what is an extraordinary rise of the AfD. It's worrying, but the government has a few months to actually take the initiative over especially the economy and housing and rental issues.
Thaddeus, you have a comment or a question for Judy?
Well, the comment is the MAGA movement has not had particular success in midterm elections here in the United States. So if that gives any heart to some of the people over there. The other aspect of it is, for the Germans, they talk about what they'd like to see out of the United States, out of the MAGA movement elsewhere. But have they talked about anything that they may have to do or the EU may have to do on their end to try to improve this relationship? Because it is kind of a two-way street.
Well, there's the old skilled diplomats, and they featured in the big Financial Times piece the other day saying, we have to keep up the dialogue, we have to keep talking, we just can't pretend that the United States doesn't exist under the present administration. So there's the old experienced school of diplomats say we have to keep the connections open, and they're still our friends, they're still our allies, they're still in NATO, whatever all the damage done to some of the multilateral institutions. We have to keep talking and trying to work together and admit the differences, but try to bridge them. There's that school, and there's the other school, more or less exemplified by President Macron of France, saying, okay, we have these problems, but dialogue is not the only solution. One of the big solutions is that the Europeans have to find their own autonomy, and this means integration. This means much further integration on economy, on industrial base, on the banking union, and so on. So maybe you could bring the two of them together, dialogue and diplomacy on the one hand, and doing and establishing facts on the ground on integrating the EU on the other to deal with the unpredictability of that relationship between the United States and Europe.
We do have in common one thing the Gallup poll identifies most recently in a release. That is, high income, low income, upper middle, lower middle, doesn't matter. The grave concern around the world from those speaking to Gallup is the economy. And by that, they mean the standard of living, high prices, and low wages. It overwhelmingly concerned, strikingly, the most the lopsided concern is the upper middle income and high income. Overwhelmingly, nothing else comes close. Low income also has concerns about food and shelter because of the cost of electricity and affordability in general. But we're looking at certainly a phenomena that is true in Europe and in the United States. And the question is, does this contribute to the general anxiety, the apparent fracture between the U.S. and the EU? Judy, I understand we do have in common our anxiety about the economy. Do you find that something that we can work on together as opposed to those who want to push us apart for their short-term gains?
Well, it's very hard to work together given how the administration in the United States goes from crisis to crisis and tends to use tariffs or blackmail as threats if one country doesn't go the way that the United States wants it to go. For instance, look at the bridge that Canada wants to open, a new bridge that's due to be opened between Canada and the United States. And now President Trump is saying, oh, we're going to stop opening this bridge because of what Canada is doing and so on. And this actually creates unpredictability. And as you say with the Gallup poll, I mean, even those on good incomes, they wonder, well, what do you invest in now? Why is it so unpredictable? And there's no kind of compass anymore. And I think this is what comes out of the Gallup poll: the lack of compass, the lack of direction. The lack of a kind of map of some sort of where the economies are going, both in the United States and in Europe. We will see what happens after the Japanese elections, indeed, or what happens in China. But actually, what seems to be unraveling is the security that had been expected and built up over the decades. And this kind of economic security is fading very quickly, on the back, of course, of the big crisis of the Lehman Brothers, which happened several years ago. And somehow the economies took a long time to recover, and now they're being beaten back again.
Judy Dempsey is a senior scholar for the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. She's in Berlin. Thaddeus McCotter, writing at American Greatness, former member of Congress. He's in Detroit, observing worldwide phenomena of anxiety, tension and anxiety among heretofore traditional allies. I'm John Batchelor. Well, we got through it with my interruption at one point. Let me watch this very carefully. All right, here we are. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Thaddeus. Thaddeus, I apologize.
No, it's nothing. It's nothing you did. My computer just died. I must have lost the internet signal. It happened. It's the second time this has happened.
This is part of the miracles of digital universe. Every once in a while it says, so you think you're in charge, and whack. Yeah. And we're off. Judy, I didn't want to get into the partisan politics, but
no, it's fine. I'm glad.
No, I wanted to express to you the anxiety here about that is profound. Yeah. And it, especially my colleagues in the Republican Party, profound. The expectation historically is that you lose the midterm. Okay, you deal with it. But at this point, we have anxiety running in so many different directions.
That's right.
And the Democrats seem no more organized than the Republicans.
Well, this is the issue here, the unspoken issue here. It doesn't get much discussion in some of the press here, but there's extraordinary dismay at the lack of a democratic voice, the lack of a democratic agenda. They're just waiting for some Democrats to surface and say, here we go. But this is the helplessness that feeds into this. Is anybody challenging the Republicans? A part of the few Republican voices. And it's an issue here when I talk to my colleagues and friends and politicians. Where are the Democrats? Where is the opposition?
I don't have an answer. Thaddeus, do you have an answer where they
Oh,
are?
they're here. They're here. Yeah, they're here.
Okay,
I wish it were otherwise, but yeah, they're here.
good, good. Good to know.
They did very well in Virginia.
Yes.
Very well in Virginia.
Yes,
They
but
did very well in
they-
Texas. Yes.
Yes, but I mean, they did it on their own basis as well. I mean, the Virginia election, she was terrific, and she just plowed her own furrow, which was very good.
Spanberger, you mean?
Yes, Sandberger.
Oh, the former CIA agent. Yes.
The one that was most telling was the by-elections. What you call by-elections, what we call special elections.
yeah.
Elections in Texas.
Oh yeah.
Take a plus 17 or something like that Trump district and turn it into a plus 14 Democratic.
The issue here is the economy, and the thing that's going on, Judy, that you have to watch is the Democrats are increasingly left in terms of their economics, especially.
Oh.
They're going towards socialism, Democratic Socialists of America, like Mondami, Max Alexandria Cortez. So while there are some Democratic voices. They're younger, they're coming on, and they're socialist, which is not good for the economy, especially when it's the number one issue across the globe.
It won't be the galvanizing, unifying thing that'll bring them together, I don't think.
It's bringing the young people in, and that's where the energy's at on their side. It's the young people, it's the Gen Z and millennials that are driving that train right now. And I don't think the establishment can control them any more than the Republican establishment could control the MAGA movement.
Judy,
and that's what's causing consternation everywhere, is that there's just chaos on both sides.
Yes, when you drop a big block into a tub of water, it takes a while to stop sloshing back and forth. And right now, the Trump election of 24, certainly the Trump election of 16, but again in 24, was that big block that dropped into the tub. Everybody's disorderly. There was no, and certainly historically, that's what you can say, Judy. Historically, the Democrats win the House. That's what history says. And you deal with it. I mean, there is government after the opposition party controls the House of Representatives. It's routine. Thaddeus went through that. How many times has that happened to you, Thaddeus, under the Bush administration?
I'm trying to not relive that trauma.
Okay.
But it happens. It happens there, but that's an adult perspective, John. I don't know that there's a lot of maturity running loose in the marbled halls of Congress these days.
Well, I'll try to slow my adult remarks. Judy, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Nice
enjoy next week. Thank you.
It didn't work that well, but next week. Okay.
All's well.
Nice to speak to you, Thaddeus. See you, John.
Bye.
Next week. Bye. Bye.
All right, that is.
Oh, now I can see it. Oh, I see. The wrong button. Oh, a bit late. Okay, how do I get out of here? I'll get out of some.
You see the button? You see the button?
She saw the button, apparently.
All right, Thaddeus is here, and we're going to be joined momentarily by the author, Mark Clifford. Mark has a very important book that's available right now. It's just published last year, I believe. The Troublemaker, How Jimmy Lai Became a Billionaire, Hong Kong's Greatest Dissident, and China's Most Feared Critic. This is the biography of a man who now stands condemned by the People's Republic of China. And the condemnation springs from the People's Republic of China's attempt to cut off all complaint and dissent over democracy. So I welcome the author, Mark Clifford, because there's breaking news about Jimmy Lai, very disappointing, but it's part of the cycle that we've been living with. And Mark, a very good day to you. Thank you for joining. I hope you hear me well.
I hear you well. Great to be here, John. Thank you for your continuing interest in Jimmy Lai's plight.
I want to introduce you to my good colleague and friend, Thaddeus McCotter, former member of Congress. He's in Detroit, and he's very well apprised of the Jimmy Lai matter and, in general, the persecution of peoples in China. Thaddeus first introduced me, for example, many years ago to the persecution of the Xinjiang, the persecution of East Turkestan, the persecution of the Uyghurs. And from that, you can easily see how the same playbook is used by the Central Committee and State Security to persecute, to take an example and hold it up and be just beastly towards the example in order to intimidate people.
Nice to meet you, Thaddeus. I'm sorry I'm not in Detroit to have a coffee with you in person, but good to be
Nice
here.
to meet you. Thank you for your book.
Well, thank you.
We'll begin immediately, Mark. This is for tonight. And I explained this conversation we're having. This is something I call the making of the John Batchelor Show. For reasons that cannot be easily fathomed, this septuagenarian decided to try the front line of the digital universe, which is live streaming, where few dare to go because things go wrong while you're online. And when you're doing it live, it's gone. You can't edit it later. So we're online to a live audience now watching us. At the same time, I'm going to record what we say to each other and use it in the radio show and the podcast later on today. So it's a triple hitter. I'm not quite sure why I'm doing this because it causes me all kinds of despairing moments when I press the right button. But right now we look lined up to do this correctly. So here we go. I'll start from the top. This will be 17 and a half minutes for tonight, Mark. Thank you. 5. And allow us, let me make sure we get the headline for Jimmy. 5, 4, there it is. That's what I want. I'm getting the latest remake on Jimmy Lai. Okay, ABC calls him a tycoon. The Guardian calls him, quotes Jimmy Lai's son. The NBC News goes for democracy movement, 20 years in prison. Okay, here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Batchelor, and I welcome my colleague, Thaddeus McCotter, American Greatness, and we go immediately to the breaking news in Asia and worldwide. This has to do with a man named Jimmy Lai, who has now been condemned to 20 years of prison by the People's Republic of China working through the Hong Kong government. Because? Well, there is no because. Jimmy Lai is world famous as a publisher, an entrepreneur. He ran and authored the Apple Daily newspaper that was a dominant feature of the success of Hong Kong for many decades. And then he was detained and charged and put on trial. It's 5 years later now. And the charge is pretty much that he was advocating freedom and democracy. That's not exactly easy to understand how that is a crime. So Thaddeus and I welcome someone to help all of us understand not only where Jimmy Lai is now, condemned to 20 years by the trial that is itself questionable, but also where he came from. I welcome Mark Clifford, the author of The Troublemaker, How Jimmy Lai Became a Billionaire, Hong Kong's Greatest Dissident, and China's Most Feared Critic. Mark, welcome, and a very good day to you. The news from Asia about Jimmy Lai's sentencing was not a surprise, but then at the same time, it's despairing. Why? Because Jimmy Lai is a British citizen. Because recently, the Prime Minister of Britain, Mr. Keir Starmer, was in China speaking directly to the leadership. In addition to that, the President of the United States had occasion to speak directly to the Chinese leadership about Jimmy Lai. And yet, he now stands condemned. So help us to understand where this is in terms of the expectation that a 78-year-old man with diabetes will die in prison unless the People's Republic of China reverses its bad decision-making. Good day to you, Mark.
Well, good day to you, John, and thanks as always for your interest in this case. As you say, Jimmy was just convicted Monday, February 9th of committing journalism, or as you put it, advocating for democracy and freedom. We had a 2+ year trial. It's 5.5 years to the day since he was first arrested on these charges. And, can't really tell what he was guilty of other than running a newspaper and putting his money where his considerable fortune, where his mouth was in fighting for freedom in Hong Kong and fighting for the rule of law. As you say, he's a British citizen. came to the colony as it was then a British colony as a penniless 12-year-old, made his fortune in making sweaters, selling shirts, and then got into media. And for that, the Chinese government decided they needed to make an example of him. And it's, the old cliche of killing the chicken to scare the monkeys is very much what's on display here. The message is, it doesn't matter how much money you have, how much prestige internationally you have, what you have in terms of your Catholic faith. If we don't like what you're doing, we will send you to jail for the rest of your natural life. And that's what they've done to Jimmy Lai.
Thaddeus, you have a comment and question from Mark Clifford.
Mark, there's also an example that they're sending, because this is almost precisely what was said that the Chinese communists would do once they got their hands on Hong Kong. So the persecution of Jimmy Lai and the fact that he's also a Catholic at this point is not lost upon me. But this is exactly what critics said would happen. They would metastasize their communist regime into Hong Kong. Is it not?
You're absolutely right. And I have to confess being guilty of naively thinking that they might actually make an exception and keep their promise. And the promises were sweeping. Deng Xiaoping, the former paramount leader of China, the great economic reformist, met Prime Minister Maggie Thatcher back in 1982 in the Great Hall of the People and said everything will be fine. An international treaty followed between Britain and China, lodged at the United Nations, where China promised that Hong Kong's freedoms would not only be the same as during the British colonial period, but it'd be extended. There was then a mini constitution that China promulgated. They said, you're going to be even freer. You'll be masters in your own house. You can throw off these colonial yokes that have been weighing down on you. You're going to have universal suffrage, which at most meant electing the mayor and the city council, nothing too dramatic. China couldn't deal even with that. It couldn't deal with a Jimmy Lai and thousands, actually really millions of other Hong Kongers who said, we want to keep our freedoms. Most of us, or our parents or our grandparents, fled China precisely because we didn't like the way you were running things. And here we are, as you say, Thaddeus, 20-something years after the 1997 handover, I guess almost 30 now. And China's just completely broken its promises. And this is horrible for Hong Kong. But I think the message that China is sending to the world is, we don't care. We're going to run things our way. It doesn't matter where you are. We will, if we don't like you, we will shut you down.
Mark, I want to make this also a story of the people of Hong Kong who are living under this threat now, and the people who have left Hong Kong, it was their life, but they knew it would be unsafe. My understanding is that the mainland party, the Chinese propagandists, are attempting to reorganize Hong Kong as a success to attract financial confidence from outside of Hong Kong, from international banking, from using the stock exchange with its apparent transparency, from the idea that Hong Kong was the capital center of capitalism in Asia. Is that success? Is that attempt successful now, or am I just reading the propaganda?
Well, you're certainly reading the propaganda quite well, because that's what they would like to do. Let's be honest, there has been superficially some success. Hong Kong is one of the largest markets in the world for international public offerings. That goes up and down. Right now it's up. I would say it's kind of a Potemkin capital market. It's mainland Chinese companies coming to Hong Kong, listing their stocks, and then having mainland institutions buy those stocks to pump up the market artificially. I think there's the international attempt that you mentioned, and certainly the Goldman Sachs's and Morgan Stanley's of the world are there. Their chief executives, senior leadership is happy to go every November when Hong Kong has this global financial summit where they parade leading Wall Street financiers. But actually, I think there's something more interesting and more insidious going on, which is that the Chinese economy is really flatlining. And I think Americans, look, there's a lot of great stuff coming out of China, but I think Americans have not really woken up to the fact that the demographic collapse in China, which has just started, coupled with an unbelievable real estate collapse, has meant that there's really no growth in the mainland economy except from exports. And my understanding from mainland sources is that the leadership is desperate to get consumers spending again. And one of the ways that they're trying to do it is to pump up stock markets. And Hong Kong is part of that. So it serves a twin purpose: propaganda for the West to make it look like the market is a great global market, and then trying to get the animal spirits of very depressed Chinese consumers going again.
Thaddeus, you have a question for Mark.
Well, they're really they're cross purposes when you think about it. What they did to Jimmy Lai tells the rest of the world, do not come here, or we're going to do it to you. At the same time, they're sitting with their hand out, say, come on in, we'll make you rich if you just follow the rules. So in a certain sense, what you're looking at is why I believe the American people intuit that communist China is a strategic threat and rival model of governance. The American corporate class and the political class do not seem to understand this, and they are abetting and are actually in some ways complicit with expanding the power of this regime. Is that about right?
Thaddeus, you hit the nail on the head. And the Chinese are, well, they think they can have it both ways. They think they can throw people like Jimmy, and I should say I was on the board of Next Digital, which published the newspaper Apple Daily. I've got besides Jimmy, I've got 6 other colleagues who've been behind bars since the summer of 2021, not quite as long as Jimmy, but coming up on 5 years. They've just gotten 7 to 10 years in this kangaroo court that's just handed down the sentences. And yet the Chinese think that, if they get Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and the rest of the Wall Street banks, that they can hoodwink the world. And they are smart enough to understand that the soft underbelly of the U.S. is Wall Street, and they've played Wall Street extremely well. So they're giving out mandates to underwrite some of these big stock issues. Morgan Stanley is perhaps the most notorious in my mind because of its involvement with a mining company that had a lot of operations in Xinjiang, where you've done the work, Thaddeus. About the forced labor situation there, and they basically carved out a sanctioned company, a company that was sanctioned because of its adjacency, let's say, to forced labor practices, and listed the thing. This is Morgan Stanley. So luckily, we do have some people in the political class, such as John Molinar, who's running a fellow person from Michigan, who's running the select committee that's trying to deal with the Chinese Communist Party, who's been asking some very pointed questions of Morgan Stanley. I think we need to work a lot harder to see that Wall Street in particular is not working at cross purposes with our national security.
Your earlier book, Today, Hong Kong, Tomorrow, the World. You were right. You were right at the time. It was evident. However, it takes a while for a prophet to be recognized in his own land. Has there been a change of weather for that book and for that general argument that's been made around the world that Hong Kong is a trap? Don't believe it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Today, Hong Kong, Tomorrow, the World, the subtitle was What China's Crackdown Reveals About Its Plans to End Freedom Everywhere. Pretty strong stuff, and I got to give credit to my editor at St. Martin's Press for kind of jazzing it up with that subtitle. The book came out at the beginning of February 2022, so 4 years ago. At first, some few raised eyebrows. That seemed a little maybe all over the top, if not very strong. 3 weeks later, Russia invaded Ukraine, and sadly, that thesis has been borne out. And I think that the behavior of the axis of chaos, Russia, Iran, North Korea, China has been borne out. But I think China in particular, people say, oh, come on, it's just Hong Kong. What does that have to do with the rest of the world? Look at the bullying that we're seeing of Taiwan. We're seeing everything short of a blockade, which could be put in place next week, I think, if China wanted to. Look at the bullying that the Japanese prime minister has undergone simply for saying that if there were an invasion of Taiwan, it would affect Japan's national interest. Pretty bland statement, right? For that, the Japanese get bullied. Look at the bullying that my colleagues in the US and in the UK get from Chinese agents and the Hong Kong government, which has put bounties out on their heads. So we are seeing China not only, not only not retreating, but actually extending its bullying behavior around the world. They're trying to tell academics, politicians, business people, all of us, what we can say and what we can't say about places like Xinjiang, Tibet, Hong Kong, Taiwan. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous.
We will turn just a moment to Jimmy Lai's story. It's important to come up to date about the politics of this. Thaddeus McCutter, American Greatness, Mark Clifford. The book I highly recommend is The Troublemaker. I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor with my colleague Thaddeus McCutter, American Greatness, and we are very pleased to be speaking with Mark Clifford, the author of the new book, Troublemaker, about Jimmy Lai, who now stands condemned, effectively life in prison. He's 78 years old. And I celebrate 78-year-olds for a particular reason, but in any event, he's got diabetes. He's been in jail for 5 years. He's kept from his wish to celebrate his religion, Catholicism. And all of that adds up to what is to be done. Well, the British son of the jailed Hong Kong media entrepreneur Jimmy Lai, his name is Sebastian, criticized the UK government for failing to place conditions on his father's release during the Prime Minister's visit to China last week. Mark, just a thought or two. Keir Starmer is the head of an overwhelming majority in Parliament. I believe it's 165 Labour votes. He has his troubles with his own party. But in any event, his visit to China and remarks since then are a blank on the matter of getting Jimmy Lai out of this condemnation. Why? What is the hesitation?
Well, it's interesting. Ever since Keir Starmer took office a year and a half ago, he's, for some odd reason, been desperate to have a visit to China. At first, we thought it was just for economics. I mean, the British economy has been sputtering at best, especially since Brexit, and Starmer and Labour are looking for growth wherever they can get it. But there seems to have been something more, and I'm not quite sure what it was, but he came back with nothing. He got a tariff cut on whiskey from 10% to 5% after really begging the Chinese for a visit. He went to visit the Forbidden City. They didn't even have the courtesy to clear it of tourists. So he had to kind of, share his views of the Forbidden City with throngs of Chinese tourists. I mean, it was really a humiliating visit. He brought up, we're told we don't have any details. We're told he brought up the case of Jimmy Lai. He said that publicly. He's spoken publicly about the need to get Jimmy out. Jimmy is a British citizen. Just to remind your listeners, you said that before, but really important. As far as I know, and I did write the biography, Jimmy has never held a Chinese passport. He left on a visa and escaped to a visa to Macau, came to Hong Kong as a penniless 12-year-old. He lived under British colonial rule. He thrived under British colonial rule. In 1992, he took full British citizenship. He's never been a Chinese citizen. And yet Starmer does not seem to be willing to really make Jimmy's release a major issue that he's willing to negotiate on. Just a couple of weeks ago, right before he left, he gave permission for China to build a massive new embassy. They call it the mega embassy in London. And yet he seems to have gotten really a couple of cases of whiskey. But meanwhile, this brave freedom fighter is languishing in jail.
Thaddeus, we have about a minute. Go ahead.
Well, the way you can judge any country, it's often said, is how it treats its citizens. But this is not even an internal matter for the Chinese, is it, Mark? Because he's a British citizen. So therefore, there's two governments involved. And also along that line, wouldn't you agree that isn't foreign investment not just simply an internal matter for the communist Chinese? Because that also entails two countries. So again, they're having it both ways, aren't they?
And we let them get away with it. And somebody like Keir Starmer is, I'm sorry to say, a real enabler. He seemed to be so taken by the pageantry, the show of going to China, that he's forgotten his country's vital interests. And as you say, forgotten what's most important of all is the ability of a government to protect its citizens. It's a really sad commentary on how far Britain has fallen, really, since that 1793 mission by Lord Macartney, who famously refused to kowtow before the Chinese emperor. I'm sorry to say, this looked very much like Keir Starmer kowtowing in China.
The book is The Troublemaker, How Jimmy Lai Became a Billionaire, Hong Kong's Greatest Dissident, and China's Most Feared Critic. Mark Clifford, the author. That is McCotter. I'm John Batchelor. Thank you, Mr. Clifford.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. Nice to meet you, Thaddeus, and great to see you, John.
And
Nice to
we'll
meet
be
you.
back to you soon. We've got a big story to tell. Thank you.
Great. Take care.
Good day. And we have a few minutes, Thaddeus. I wanted to reflect on I mentioned the anecdote of the Uyghurs. That was my first occasion of dealing with the People's Republic of China as a bully and a brute. It was a revelation to me. And the people you contacted back then, what is their fate? I've followed some of the story through the book called a book about the Uyghur persecution. But what about overall?
Well, as you know, it was Lee Mason was the one who was really a champion of the Uyghur people and bringing it to our attention. I think I came out to New York one time.
Yes,
she was with me, and we did a show on it. And obviously, when you have reports that have subsequently come out, even places like the UN and others talking about how it's a genocide of the Uyghur people, again, it just goes to show you that this regime is a barbaric regime. And the fact that it uses its own people as a captive audience to entice foreign investors should tell you everything you need to know. That and how they will treat other people. If they treat their own citizens this badly, they're going to continue to do it to anybody they encounter. And I think Keir Starmer is one of the latest. He should have had his eyes open. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But, where there's life, there's hope, I guess.
Is it your measure that Congress is up to speed on this? There is that special committee.
Molnar's doing a really good job. John's doing a really good job with that committee, doing the best that he can. There's other pressures on there, the partisan pressures, everything else. But I do think that there is a bipartisan coalition within the Congress to recognize that Communist China is a strategic threat, rival a model of governance that is attacking the United States with its unrestricted warfare, and it needs to be addressed. I do think this administration gets it. I believe that even if there's another Democratic administration, they will internally understand this. Certainly the national security people will. And I think that you're seeing because it's eclipsed by the other hyper-partisan nature of our politics these days, is there's an emerging consensus on a bipartisan approach to dealing with the threat of Communist China across the board. I would argue it needs to be linked, it needs to be coherent, and it needs to be bipartisan across the board to address every aspect that they do. Because when they talk about their unrestricted warfare, John, what people miss is very simple. Anything they can do to hurt the United States and our ability to help champion human rights and have any type of success, they're going to engage in. Nothing is off the table in how they will attack the United States by their own admission.
It was many years since I was introduced to the Uyghurs. And I'm now in correspondence with Nuri Turkel, who wrote the book No Escape. He was born in one of the concentration camps, and he eventually got his mother out. But what I've learned over these last years is that the international financial world is willing to ignore China's brutality. That's what I've learned. Have I taken the right lesson, Thaddeus?
That is the lesson. Remember, a communist regime looks at the West and says they will sell us the rope we will use to hang them. And the American Western capitalists, the EU, the United States, elsewhere, they're simply proving the communists right. And it's despicable. If the economy is the number one issue in the world, John, to bring this back around, the best way to increase the economy and the economic prosperity of people around the world is to free the Chinese people and let their entrepreneurial ability help move the ball down the field. Instead, they're being captured by this kleptocracy of the communist Chinese regime. And this is the 21st century. I think everyone should realize communism not only doesn't work, it's antithetical to human nature, and this needs to join the USSR in the trash can of history. But that's just me, and I'm not on Wall Street.
I understand you're not on Wall Street, but we all participate by making remarks. I've discovered the financial VIPs are really sensitive people, Thaddeus. I mean, they don't like having their name associated with negative things. It spooks them.
You mean like a genocide against the Uyghurs?
Yes, something like that.
But they'll put lawn signs in front of their house talking about what wonderful people they are. Not in our house,
I just mentioned that it's odd that the most powerful and most well protected by their fortune people are sensitive about a public opinion.
Who wants to be seen as the hypocrite that they are? Look at what they're funding. Look at what they're enabling.
It would not be a blow to their vision of the world to stand back from China, as Mark evidenced in one or two remarks. The Chinese economy not only is flatlined, they're in a long cycle of deflation and unemployment and despair throughout the land. It's not going to be solved by propaganda.
During one of Mao's great famines, the great famine that he caused,
Right.
they were shipping rice out of the country while people were eating dirt so they could build up their foreign reserves and engage in foreign policy. That is what the nature of that communist regime has done to its people and will continue to do to its people and will do to anybody they get their hands on and can do it to. We should not be abetting and enabling this.
About the younger people in this country, the so-called democratic socialists, are they apprised of what we're talking about, or is it an indifference to them? We have about a minute.
Well, I think it's a desperation. They're saying the price of homes, the American dream is slipping away from them, and they're latching onto anything that they think will help. I think that the president with his rhetoric has not helped because he tends to alienate younger people. But at the same time, many of his policies are actually more helpful to them. So it's kind of a catch-22, but they're looking for things that will help them. And in many ways, they're very despairing that they're not going to live to the standards of their parents. And so I don't think it's necessarily an ignorance on their part. It's just a case of somebody help me, and at least these people look like they want to try to help. And that's a very dangerous place for any nation to be, especially with its young people.
Are we using the right language to talk about Jimmy Lai and Hong Kong? Or are they deaf to that, or do they understand?
They understand it, but how often are you seeing this? You may see it a couple of little headlines, but if you think about where kids are getting, especially the younger generation, Gen Z, they're going to TikTok. Right. Where did TikTok come from, John? And I still believe, no matter what kind of flag you put on it, it's going to be responsive to that regime and do whatever it's told.
Thaddeus, I thank you this morning. We went from Berlin to Hong Kong. I'm going to press the button and go to the music, and we will speak again soon enough.
And I'm going to bed. Okay.
That is Makata, American Greatness. I'm John Batchelor. Thank you for listening and watching.